border crisis. Former President Donald Trump accuses President Joe Biden of creating a national disaster. Republican Congresswoman, why Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene calls attacks against her spiritual warfare. China sanctions, why the country's treatment of Uyghur Muslims is leading to international condemnation. And 60th anniversary. Pope Francis celebrates the founding of the Pontifical Filipino College. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, March 22nd, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. With thousands of children coming alone to the border, the White House sends the coordinator for the southwest border to Mexico. Her mission to figure out a plan to fix what former President Donald Trump is calling a national disaster. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, tonight the White House has sent Ambassador Roberta Jacobson to Mexico. Another official is off to Guatemala. They're trying to, quote, manage migration. Now, the White House emphasizes the border remains closed. This as criticism mounts by the day.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki addresses reporters as the number of children in Border Patrol facilities climbs.
Children presenting at our border who are fleeing violence, who are fleeing prosecution, who are fleeing terrible situations is not a crisis.
The Biden administration is struggling to move minors into shelters. These photos show conditions inside a government facility in Texas.
Our alternative is to send children back on this treacherous journey. That is not, in our view, the right choice to make.
The current administration blames former President Donald Trump, calling his past policies cruel. The former president shot back, writing, "We proudly handed the Biden administration the most secure border in history. Instead, in the span of just a few weeks, the Biden administration has turned a national triumph into a national disaster." The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has urged action. We once again call on legislators from both chambers of Congress to work together to enact broader, vitally needed reforms to address our broken immigration system. Meanwhile, the battle to beat coronavirus. The COVID-19 response team is worried
that if we don't take the right actions now, we will have another avoidable surge, just as we are seeing in Europe right now, and just as we are so aggressively scaling up vaccination.
And in Florida, Vice President Kamala Harris arrives in Jacksonville, visiting a COVID-19 vaccination site. Nearly 1 in 3 adults in the U.S. has now received at least one vaccine dose.
Also tonight, in the coming months, you can expect to hear a lot more from former President Donald Trump. As you know, he was booted off of Twitter, where he had more than 80 million followers. But tonight, a spokesperson says he will soon be launching his own platform. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Now, dozens of House Democrats are backing a resolution to expel Georgia Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Congress. The reason? Well, they claim that she helped to incite the January 6th Capitol insurrection and made violent statements against top Democrats. Representative Taylor Greene is now speaking out. She talked to our Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales, who joins us now with this report. Eric?
Well, Tracy, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene tells me that she became public enemy #1 from House Democrats only after she started expressing her pro-life policies. And she says that this latest attempt to get her expelled from Congress is spiritual warfare. And she says that the only way that she can actually beat this is with the help of her faith.
I believe some of my Republican colleagues, and one in particular, wish harm upon this legislative body.
Democratic Congressman Jimmy Gomez filed the expulsion resolution after introducing it in January. In a floor speech, the California Democrat cited Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's role in enticing the January 6th Capitol riot. And press reports which claim before being elected, Greene had expressed support online for violence against top Democrats.
I take no joy in introducing this resolution, but any member who incites political violence and threatens our lives must be expelled.
I have broken no laws. I have committed nothing against ethics. The media has decided to smear me by taking little pieces of words I've said, but they don't tell the whole story. You see, they've just created a character that they want the public to believe.
Congresswoman Greene tells me if Democrats are upset with the words she used several years ago, what about the words being used by current lawmakers?
We have Maxine Waters that called for attacks on Trump supporters. We have a member of Congress that slept with a Chinese spy, Eric Swalwell.
The Georgia Republican says she will continue to defend God and help save the lives of the unborn, which she says is not part of the Democrats' policy.
It's me calling out their hypocrisy and putting it back in their face. And I believe on a spiritual level, it is a spiritual war, because when you're someone that is constantly speaking God's truth and putting it out there, you get attacked. And I've been attacked more than any other member of Congress, possibly in history.
She is now asking Catholics and other members of the pro-life community to write and call their legislature here on Capitol Hill. They say that you need to let them know that it's not right to use your tax dollars to fund abortions around the world. As for the expulsion, well, it likely will not pass because two-thirds vote needs to happen, and that means that Republicans, dozens of Republicans, would have to go along with it. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
The Supreme Court will hear whether to reinstate the death sentence against Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. The Trump Justice Department appealed last July's federal ruling that Tsarnaev's trial judge had not protected against jury bias. The former head of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia is weighing in on having a U.S. president who is a baptized Catholic but disagrees in practice with core church principles. In an interview with EWTN's Catholic news agency, Archbishop Charles Chaput says in part, quote, "You can't be Catholic and cherry pick the issues you choose to believe. You can certainly try and enjoy the applause as you do, but big tent Catholicism sooner or later ends up as an empty tent. Nobody really needs it." For more on this story, including what Archbishop Chaput says about his new book and why he wrote it now, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. The United States and several allies launched sanctions on China over what U.S. officials are calling a genocide of Uyghur Muslims in that country. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says, in part, a united transatlantic response sends a strong signal to those who violate or abuse international human rights. This morning, the European Union approved measures against 4 Chinese communist officials. Beijing responded with sanctions against the EU. Joining us now is Tom Farr, president of the Religious Freedom Institute. Dr. Farr, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I'd like to start off by getting your thoughts on the sanctions against the Chinese officials. Do you think that was the proper route to go, so to speak, and do you think they go far enough?
Absolutely. It was the right thing to do. I'm encouraged by Secretary Blinken. I'm encouraged by what he did in Anchorage last week, where he did a shot across the bow, directly across the table from the Chinese. He's not backing away. This is a small step, but it's very important. You'll recall perhaps that Secretary Pompeo under the previous administration declared genocide. This was a genocide. Ambassador at Large Sam Brownback declared that China was conducting a war on faith. This continues this, but expands it by bringing our to bear, as he said, our partners, the Canadians, the United Kingdom, especially the EU, which is not engaged in something like this. So it's a very important step for something that really needs to get much larger.
Overall, do you think any of the pressure being mounted against China regarding the Uyghur Muslims is actually working? And what exactly would you like to see happen?
Well, it's not working yet. And it's going to work in increments, if at all, by causing the Chinese, because of international embarrassment or because of some costs, we're not allowing certain officials into our country or into the EU countries, officials that have some authority over these concentration camps. And I would remind your viewers that these Muslims, hundreds of thousands of them, innocent men, women, and children, are being subjected to horrific crimes against humanity, torture, rape, medical experiments. These are concentration camps. We need to remember that. The Chinese are not going to change this unless we can ramp up the pressure. So I really hope the Biden administration will do this. I hope that they will replace Ambassador Brownback with an ambassador at large very, very quickly. We should remember what the Chinese are doing here. This is a communist party. It is a totalitarian state, which is doing what communist totalitarians have done throughout history. They're attempting to remove all dissidents from within their state so they can expand their power around the world. They want to become the #1 power in the world. The United States stands in the way. If we can see this as a national security issue for us, as well as a human rights humanitarian issue, two sides of the same coin, we will expand what we're doing. We'll make the pain even worse for the Chinese. It's too much to expect that this will end, but we are giving hope to the Uyghurs. We're giving hope to other religious communities inside China and to the people of Hong Kong that not only the West, but the world is paying attention. So this is very important.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Farr, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us about this very important subject. We really appreciate it. Tom Farr, president of the Religious Freedom Institute. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Venezuela's Holy Week services are now suspended after a presidential announcement.
Será nuevamente en cuarentena radical.
Yesterday, Nicolas Maduro called for a radical quarantine. His new announcement reverses a prior one that said Holy Week could be flexible this year. Maduro cited the rise in COVID-19 cases and the presence of the variant detected in Brazil. During a Lenten procession Saturday in Zagreb, Croatia, Catholic faithful prayed for protection from both COVID-19 and frequent earthquakes.
We have the relics of saints who are against the plague, so against the COVID. We have St. Charles Borromeo, we have St. Sebastian, and St. Rochus. And we have a very special relic of a very special saint called St. Emigdius, who is against earthquakes, who is the patron against earthquakes.
A group of over 100 faithful and clerics participated despite government restrictions to no more than 25 people in public. Pope Francis met with the Pontifical Filipino College today to mark 60 years of its foundation.
Cari tutti, non siate uomini dell'eterno domani.
Speaking to the 50 religious men and women, the Holy Father said God calls us to live in the present and gaze positively towards the future. Joining us now is Father Gregory Gaston, Rector at the Pontifical Filipino College in Rome. Father Gregory, great to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us what struck you the most about the Holy Father's message today.
Well, actually, even before his message, when he came towards us, I was quite surprised because he came directly to Cardinal Tagle, who was at my side, and then he also greeted me and then went to his chair, right there at the middle in front. So I was thinking that he would go directly to the chair, but such a little nice detail of appreciating the presence also of Cardinal Tagle and of course all the priests. Regarding his message, since we were celebrating the 500 years of Christianity in the Philippines and also 60 years of the Filipino College here in Rome, he talked a little about the past, but he said we should not dwell in the past, only limit ourselves to the past, nor should we dream of maybe uselessly, in a certain way, about imaginations about the future, what the bishop might give us, a special task, etc. But for us to live our future well, we have to anchor everything on the present, and that is why we also have to focus on the present.
Well, I understand that you gave the Pope a gift. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it was and his reaction to it?
Yes, he was, as always, so appreciative. We gave him a hat and a matching bag made of native materials from the Philippines, from the central part of the Philippines. And then we also gave him a sort of a scarf, cloth, also made in the Philippines. And then one painting done by one of our priests here from the southern part of the northernmost island of the Philippines, from Bicol, depicting Our Lady of Peace and Good Voyage, our patroness here.
That is wonderful. When you gave him those gifts, how did he react? Did he say anything?
Yes, he was so happy, no? You could see the smile on his face, no? And he would say thank you and thank you. And then when I gave him, I think, the second or third gift, he even joked, no? Oh, everything for me, everything for me. No? And I didn't know how to react, no? Because he was there. And then also, of course, the Holy Father, no? He received so many gifts, but these simple things, no? I think he really appreciates them.
That is wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Also, before I let you go, can you tell us about the Filipino College and exactly your role there as rector?
Yes, it's a residence for priests doing further studies here in Rome. In Europe, when you say college, you're not actually referring to a university or a school, no, after high school, but rather a college is a residence. So here we have our own going formation. I try to provide them with the milieu so that they could pray, they could study, they could do pastoral work. On weekends, we serve the Filipino communities. We celebrate 50 masses in Rome alone. Well, before the lockdown, now a little less. And then some of our priests, we go to Switzerland, to Spain, to Germany, to France for the Filipino communities, especially during longer breaks. But here, we have our life here at the college. And then we train for 2, 3, 4 years, depending on their programs, our priests to specialize so that when they go home, they would be teaching the seminaries, they would be handling the tribunals, they would be handling the different offices assigned to them, of course, parishes as well, assigned to them by the bishops.
Well, Father Gregory, thank you so much for joining us today. Always wonderful to talk with you. Father Gregory Gaston, rector at the Pontifical Filipino College in Rome. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, coronavirus crisis. More churches announce plans to hold in-person Mass. Ahead of Holy Week, Southern Missouri Catholics may return to Mass in person with Saturday's upcoming vigil of Palm Sunday. Bishop Edward Bryce of Springfield, Cape Girardeau writes, "Now is the time to return to Mass. I assure you that safety precautions will continue. I encourage everyone to wear a mask, be aware of your closeness to others, and sanitize often. Together, we can make it a safe experience." Well, late last week, lawmakers in Arkansas passed a measure to protect medical conscience and religious freedom in health care. Among those who testified in a hearing late February was Lewis Brown, executive director of the Christ Medicus Foundation. The Medical Ethics and Diversity Act now heads to the desk of Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson. And Lewis Brown joins me now. Lewis, great to see you. Welcome back. Let's talk a little bit more about this measure and the reason you decided to testify. Why was it so important to you?
It's so important because medical conscience is a basic civil right. It's part of the civil rights tradition of our country. And medical conscience is vital to protecting the very religious and moral convictions that compel so many doctors, nurses, medical students to go into the medical field and care for the sick, the suffering, the most vulnerable. We have to protect that heart, that reason, that very reason that so many of our healthcare workers go into the medical profession to begin with, that moral and religious conviction that we must care for the sick and the suffering. And so protecting that vital civil right of medical conscience is important for our medical professionals so that they can do their job. It's important for patients, particularly those that are sick and suffering. So many of our faith-based people of faith that are providing care out here in the United States and places like Arkansas are those that are caring for the most vulnerable. And so it's vital that we have that right to protect patients. It's vital for a diverse healthcare workforce. It's vital for healthcare access to those that are suffering the most.
Lewis, does this proposal, does it have any significance beyond the state of Arkansas? And do you know, are there other states that are considering some similar measures?
I think it has significance beyond the state of Arkansas. I think that many states probably will be considering the possibility of protecting the right of conscience and religious freedom in healthcare, considering protecting the right of medical conscience. We see in COVID-19 that a healthy healthcare workforce, a diverse healthcare workforce that is caring for the sick and the vulnerable is absolutely vital. Without people of faith in the healthcare workforce, without faith-based healthcare entities to care for the vulnerable, we don't have the capacity to combat future public health crisis. We need that now. It's a basic civil right. The poor and the vulnerable need it. Medical doctors, nurses, medical students that are experiencing coercion, they need that protection. I think many states are going to consider it, and I think it's vital for the future of our country.
Is there any indication that Governor Hutchinson will sign this measure? And also, what else do you think our viewers should know about this measure and its overall significance?
Sure. I'm very hopeful that the governor will see to it that this legislation becomes law in the state of Arkansas. What folks need to know is that across the country, particularly Catholic medical students, Catholic doctors, Catholic nurses, physicians' assistants, they are increasingly experiencing persecution, coercion, fear, isolation because of their religious beliefs, because of their ethical and moral convictions. And then people even that are not of faith, that are going into the medical profession based on ethical beliefs, based on moral convictions, they are increasingly experiencing that fear, that persecution, that isolation. That's not who we are as America. We have an America in which Catholic medical students are afraid to go into reproductive health care, OBGYN, because of the way that the healthcare culture is going. We have to protect their rights. We sorely need to do that. It's vital for the future of civil rights in our country. It's vital to the pro-life movement. It's vital to freedom in America. It's vital to caring for the most poor and the most vulnerable in our country.
Well, Louis, we're going to have to leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Louis Brown, Executive Director of the Christ Medicus Foundation. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, loving Jesus. How Pope Francis says we can increase our connection to Christ. And basketball superfan. How one religious sister inspires her team to win. The Archdiocese of Quito in Ecuador will host the 53rd International Eucharistic Congress in 2024. The conference will coincide with the 150th anniversary of Ecuador's consecration to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. There was only one official Mass at St. Peter's Basilica today as the new private Mass restriction went into effect. 8 worshipers participated. Normally, the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass would have been offered at 45 altars and 11 chapels. The Vatican marks World Water Day by calling for access to safe and drinkable water for everyone.
El acceso al agua potable y segura no está al alcance de todos.
Speaking on behalf of the Holy Father, the Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin says even with today's technology, there are people still without safe drinking water. The Pope calls for an educational effort to promote a sensible use of water without waste. Pope Francis says Christians have a great responsibility to help others get to know Jesus.
Vogliamo vedere Gesù.
At his Sunday address in the Vatican Library, the Holy Father said we cannot share Jesus without giving of our lives in service and love. And finally tonight, the NCAA basketball tournament is underway and a familiar team with a familiar fan has made the Sweet 16. With 101-year-old team chaplain Sister Jean Schmidt in the stands, Loyola Chicago defeated top-seeded Illinois yesterday to reach the round of 16. Sister Jean gave the team a pregame prayer yesterday similar to her role 3 years ago when the Ramblers made the Final Four. Love that story. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.